I'm very happy to welcome you all to APL Seeds 2021. It was an initiative by Connor Högstra, who said that he needed something like that. And obviously today we wrote him in to do a presentation himself. So thank you for that, Connor. Um, my name is Gitte Christensen, and I'm the Managing Director of Dyalog Limited. I'm also a Master of Biology. And why is that interesting? Because I think I would like to share with you how I fell in love with APL. When I graduated back in the 80s, APL or biologist was not the easiest way to get a job. There was no pollution and stuff that required biologists in every municipality, etc. So I found an ad in the newspaper one day advertising retraining for long-term unemployed academics to IT or EDP as it was called back then. So I took that course and we were trained in a lot of different issues, um, COBOL, Fortran, data analysis, a very early SQL database training course. And at the very end, they showed us APL. And there was one of the first expressions I saw was the one I put up here. 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 5, 6. And the result. And my mind just went, wow, there's nothing up the sleeves here. It's just doing it. There's no data declarations. There's no loop. It's just adding three numbers to three numbers without me having to do anything else than type in the expression. And I thought, if I had had access to that while we were doing our dissertation, how much more than what we did could we have done with the data we had available to us? As it was, we had done all the analysis on a Texas instrument pocket calculator, but that's a story for another day. So the language APL, it's a tool of thought. It's a way to tell the computer exactly what to do without having to tell it how to do it. There's no declarations, there's no semantics. You just tell it how to manipulate the data and get the result. And it does tell you the result without you having to declare how wide it is and how many numbers to expect, etc. Dyalog APL has APL at the core, but there's a lot of other stuff in Dyalog APL, lots of tools to integrate with the environment, database interfaces, .NET interfaces, communication tools for doing parallel computing, for doing cloud computing. And that's where most of the work that we are doing with APL is actually taking place, is keeping up with the environment and all the changes that happens in the IT industry. But APL at the core, yeah, we do change that as well. I mean, for instance, the parallel computing has demanded some additions to the APL so that it's easier to express where the parallelization should take place. So there's a constant number of enhancements and requirements from the users that we have to take care of. So APL, who uses it? Yeah, well, people who are trying to solve problems that are not already solved by somebody else, and modules made available to deal with these problems. And people who solve problems or manipulate data in environments where the conditions are constantly changing. That would be like the financial sector. It could be the oil industry. We even have a very big installation in Sweden. It's a patient record system. And I mean, if I ever knew an area where constant change and new inventions are made, it's in the medical sector, where you get new apparatus and new methods and new cures for people, and all need to be taken care of in the patient record system. And that's one we are very proud of, particularly because the users love that system. So it's where change is happening that APL is really good. And it's really good because it's a tool of thought and it allows the people who understand about the problem to actually express their thoughts to the computer and solve their problems. Obviously, very often with some skilled IT people to help them, but it does mean that you can include the people who understand the problem in the process of telling the computer what to do. So I hope you will enjoy this event and get a little taste of APL and maybe even look more into it once we are done this afternoon. And with that, I'll hand you over to Richard, who will tell you about today's program and what he's doing.
Cool, thank you very much, Gitte. Yes, I will tell you about the program. I'm also going to sort of fairly quickly give a tiny bit of historical context and tell you about some of the resources that are available and that are sort of growing ever more in recent years about, how can you get started and how can you continue once you have started learning APL and the APL way in 2021. So the first thing is I want to say thank you to everyone who registered and who's attending. I didn't have loads of or I didn't really know what to expect when we started promoting this event, but to have well over 200 registrations was a nice, pleasant surprise. And not only that, but also, if this pie chart is to be believed, the demographics of who signed up being sort of exactly what I'd hoped for. The vast majority of you having either never used APL before or only having some basic knowledge and maybe wanting to learn or see if you would like to, and if so, how you would go and advance that. So I hope that today gives you some insight in that respect. But yeah, just very briefly, I don't know how many of you are aware of this. I imagine most of you are, that APL itself is a fairly old programming language as they go. It's existed for quite a long time. But it wasn't implemented on a computer originally, right? It was designed as a mathematical notation for expressing algorithms and teaching sort of computational thinking in a time before, I guess, what you'd call modern computer science in that way. So, there are some quite cool examples, like here's a snippet of the description of the APL 360 system in APL. And you can see some of the notation has superscripts and subscripts like you see in traditional mathematical notation. And obviously, even today, those things are fairly hard to type with a keyboard. So, when it came to implementing this, IBM's APL 360, then some certain changes were made to make the notation executable. And I guess the reason I'm giving this bit of the context is just to address some of the really basic technical challenges, some of the obvious things that people ask when they first hear about APL. The first most obvious one is, what about the symbols? And yeah, decades ago, this was certainly like a hardware problem. Not only did you have the APL system, but also special methods, special keyboards to input. So this is a picture of a type ball from an APL Selectric typewriter. Actually, let's see if I've got it. Check out this. You won't be able to hear it. It's got quite almost like a machine gun, video game machine gun noise as the characters come in and out. But this is just a clip of someone using APL on I guess on a mainframe via a teletype typewriter. We aren't seeing anything. Okay. Sorry. All right. Thank you. That'll make a lot of sense. Don't worry about it. I'll link at the end to that video. All right. Don't worry about it. I see I've shared just a single. Actually, maybe. You know what? It's worth it. It's good. It's good. Let's just do it. It doesn't hurt. I got time. I cut down this anyway because I thought I'd have more. All right, let's go back here. You should be able, can you see now? You can see like a full screen YouTube video call, and you should be able to hear it as well, so I won't have to say all that again. Apologies. Let's go.
Enter x is specified as iota 5. So if I execute x, we have our vector of integers from 1 to 5. Now let me display a vector y, which is specified as 2 times iota 5. Let's have a look at y. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10.
Right, so I just think that's pretty neat. You know, seeing this thing. But yeah, okay. So that's sort of one technical challenge, which, you know, as computing moved from mainframes onto desktops, that kind of changed from a hardware, and it was sort of solved by software input methods, which were also still, even going into the 90s and early 2000s, still massive pain to set up an APL system in that way. But these days, we have Unicode. As much as a beautiful mess it is, APL symbols have been in Unicode since version 1. So they're sort of, at least the code points are ubiquitously available these days, even if, you know, the number of fonts which render them very nicely is still a little bit limited, but there's a respectable collection now, I think. So, you know, that's sort of one of the technical challenges. The other one is sort of access to APL systems, and this is getting more available these days. So Dyalog is relatively easy to download and install straight off the internet. And there's a variety of other APL dialects which you can either try directly online without installing anything, or you can go and download a free copy of those as well. So, you know, some of the technical limitations for access to APL have started to be addressed, but that kind of leaves the last much larger challenge, I'd say, of giving people access to learn APL, especially because it is fairly different to a lot of other contemporary programming languages. So not only, you know, you need to address the initial set of primitives and how they work, but there's also a certain style to this, you know, array programming that you need to learn in order to really benefit from it. And I think historically that might have been largely experienced APLers working professionally, teaching new recruits who are coming to work on these specific domain-specific systems and just happen to be using APL. But now we can see we're starting to get more resources available online so that you don't have to have direct access to an expert APLer to be able to learn APL yourself. And the APL wiki, which was sort of revamped a couple of years ago going on now, has started becoming a great resource in that regard. Actually, one thing I discovered fairly recently is you can actually do a Google search for some of the APL symbols, and you actually get a nice snippet from the APL wiki, which is very cool. So their crawlers are doing a good job, which is nice. I don't think you've been able to do this before. Mind you, not all the symbols are available. So that's just a matter of us making pages for all of the concepts which are associated with symbols, and this will get filled out. But I thought that's quite cool. Now, as Gitte said, like Dyalog APL in particular, and lots of other APLs have evolved over the years, especially to meet their users' evolving needs for a variety of reasons. So there are a lot of modernizations in APL, even though it is so old, and the core of these systems is still, you know, the same APL language. You do have these modern additions, but one thing that's nice about maintaining that core APL language at the center and having, you know, that incredible backwards compatibility that especially Dyalog has and a lot of other APL systems is that for me personally, when I'm researching for webinars and stuff, I'll often go back, I'll go on the APL wiki and look at the list of old conference papers, and other publications, and I'm able to go back and see these old publications with code snippets inside them that I don't have to do anything to try these out now. I can just copy and paste these exactly. Sometimes I'll modernize certain parts where I see opportunities there or where there's a real benefit. But I really like this aspect of it personally. So that's been quite good for me. I think that's all I really want to say about the historical context of APL. I don't want to give you a whole massive lesson there, and there's lots more that you can read about, especially on the APL wiki, in terms of the history and development of APL and other APL-like languages. There's plenty of conversations to be had there in the future, but for now, I'm just going to sort of, before I introduce the rest of our speakers, leave you with a few links to other places where you can get started learning if you do find this stuff interesting and you're intrigued by the end of all this. So in particular, the APL wiki itself has a page that's got all kinds of learning resources available, including links to all these other things, I think. So for now, that is a good central place to get lots of information. Rodrigo, who will be speaking immediately after this, has started a rework of this book called Mastering Dyalog APL by Bernard Legrand, which I have a copy of the book here. As large and comprehensive as this thing is, it started to show its age a little bit with some of the modern constructs not being included. So Rodrigo started doing an excellent job of updating, modernizing that, and making it sort of a more ebook format. So you can find that mastering.dyalog.com. Now for well over a decade now, just over a decade now, we've been maintaining tryapl.org as a place for people to be able to go and try APL online without having to actually install any software. So that also continues to be a good place to start learning, start trying things out, and find out more. And lastly, if you like hearing me drone on about APL stuff, and also Rodrigo next month, and Adam Brzezinski as well in particular, and other people, there are regular webinars online on dyalog.tv, as well as many, many videos from previous Dyalog user meetings from both APL developers and APL users. There's lots of great resources there. If you've started your sort of learning journey and you're finding yourself stuck now and then there are, an increasing number of places to ask questions. Stack Overflow, the Dyalog forums, where these days you can also find some really interesting language and maths sort of oriented posts from Roger Huey. He posts a lot on the Dyalog forums these days. It's really cool. The APL Orchard, which is a very active chat room on Stack Exchange, you can now get there through apl.chat. And very recently, some of the people from the Orchard started a Discord server. So there's different channels for different APL dialects. And to be fair, a lot of that conversation is geared around the implementation side of experimental array languages, but it's still an excellent place to ask some very experienced APLers whatever questions you might have, beginner or otherwise. And in terms of community, other events such as this one, every 2 weeks, the British APL Association hosts a sort of open session. It's been really cool to see lots of people there very regularly all of this year. I know Connor turns up occasionally, which is nice to see. And if you want to see a sort of collection of links of the wider APL community, user groups around the world, etc., once again, there's a bit on the APL wiki where you can find that. And if you need any more incentive, apart from what's going to be presented today, much better than I can describe, then there is also an annual problem-solving competition, which sort of is also targeted towards APL beginners, really, as the target demographic. In terms of the main prizes, it's a student competition, so you do need to be a full-time student to win the top prizes, but there is also a prize for professional entrance if you want to enter and you happen to not be a student. And there are cash prizes at the top So that's your incentive. Also, if you think you need to be a master, a large number, a good number of our winners from the past have been people who didn't know APL before they learned about the competition, and they learned APL and they entered the competition and they did very well. So we think it's quite achievable like that. And lastly, even if you don't want to do any coding whatsoever, you can still potentially earn cash prizes, because if you refer someone who then wins a prize, if they put you in, when they sign up, if they put you as the referrer, then you can get an equivalent cash prize if they win. So that's just a little promo for the contest there. DyalogAPLcompetition.com to sign up and enter. It's open now, so you can actually do that. Okay. Didn't know if I'd fill it all, but the time has been going. For the rest of today's program, I'm quite excited to see. We have Rodrigo, who's a very recent Dyalog employee. As I mentioned, he's working on the Mastering Dyalog rewrite and some other various teaching, evangelism, other projects, which is cool. The title here is the same as the title of the first chapter of Mastering Dyalog APL, but I don't know what Rodrigo has prepared, so I'm excited to see that. So yeah, so that's very much about, I guess, getting started with APL from the beginning. Then we have a talk that's more of like a use case from Martin. I think this is something historically that's been used quite a lot, APL to prototype some system, which unfortunately for us ends up being implemented in some other language, but it's still, I think, a really powerful use case and a demonstration of that. Then once again, more of the language-centric sort of stuff is Connor Hoekstra talking about algorithms as a tool of thought, which I think a lot of what Connor's been doing recently on YouTube and stuff like that taps into that kind of early motivation for APL, as I think I already said this, a notation for thinking and describing algorithms, thinking about and describing algorithms. And then lastly, another sort of use case, which is just really awesome, is a full-fledged boating simulator written in APL by Thomas Gustafsson. So that's going to be really great.